Good evening. My name is Elias Redstone, and I'm the Artistic Director of Photo 2021 International Festival of Photography. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which I live, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you for joining us for Photo Live, a season of conversations with Photo 2021 artists about the social and cultural role photography plays in our everyday lives. The series highlights the importance of centering Black, Indigenous, feminist, and queer voices. Photo Live expands on Photo 2021's theme, exploring the relationship between photography and the truth. Photo Live is supported by Creative Victoria and the Australia Council for the Arts, and today's event is presented in partnership with Bunjil Place. I'm delighted to introduce the Nigerian photographer Stephen Teo today, who is currently exhibiting in the Aperture exhibition, The New Black Vanguard, Photography Between Art and Fashion. The exhibition is curated by Antoine Sargent and is being presented exclusively in Australia at Bunjil Place until the 27th of September, as part of Photo 2021's expanded program. However, while Melbourne is unfortunately in lockdown, you can view a virtual tour of the exhibition online. Stephen Teo is based in Lagos, and in his work, Stephen documents the world around him and the role that fashion and style play in identity, community, culture, and religion. He focuses his lens on everyday life in his country, festivals, family celebrations, friendships, street life, and seeks to show the beauty in ordinary moments. Stephen will be in conversation with Ruth Nyaruot Ruach, a Melbourne-based South Sudanese cultural curator and multidisciplinary artist who uses art to heal, explore her surroundings, and create comfort within her Blackness. Ruth's art explores the experience of being an African of the diaspora. Ruth and Stephen, good morning over there, and good evening, Ruth. How are you both doing?
I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm glad to be up again. To see like a new day in Lagos.
Great. Well, listen, I'm going to hand over to both of you. For anyone watching live on Facebook, feel free to post questions at any time in the comments, and we'll get to these at the end of the talk. Ruth and Stephen will have a conversation for about half an hour, and then I'll return and ask questions for the audience. So I'll leave you to it for now and see you guys shortly.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, hi Ruth. How's it
Do
going?
you like what I did to the background?
Yeah, I like the gold. It's really nice. The glitters. Yeah, very nice.
I was like, let me just up my game real quick with your background.
I mean, it's amazing. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for being in conversation with me. I'm a huge fan of your work. I have a lot of friends here in Australia, especially here in Melbourne, that are obsessed with your work. And I really just want to understand the processing, the journey, how you became who you are right now, why photography, and just, the influences of being a Black African creator in this current climate right now. So I want to start off with, I guess the genesis of it all, like how you came having this fascination with documenting people, documenting the landscape of Lagos, Nigeria, and why do you think it's important for you to do the work that you do by, centering Blackness, centering the Black people that you see, the everyday people that you see, how has that influenced, the creation of your work? I'm sorry, that's like 4 questions in one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to, answer. At first, I would like to say thank you so much for your acknowledgements and also sending my love to all your friends in Melbourne, and hopefully I can visit soon or see them soon. I started my photography journey years ago because I felt the need to kind of document what I couldn't find, because growing up, I think my mom misplaced most of the images of my childhood photographs. So I kind of, felt the need to, I was really obsessed with, photographing kids. And it's just because I can't see myself when I was 3. I don't know what I looked like when I was 4 or 5. So I felt the need to kind of, that was like the first instinct that came to my head with photography. And I kind of, felt the need to also like, just, fill the gap of what I didn't have myself, And I mean, in terms of like, how I've been able to, grow has really like been about, centering my photography with, philosophical questions I studied in school. I felt the need to always, put side by side like a thought process and photography together because I think it's such a powerful thing to play with. So ideally, like I always, ask questions around why should I photograph the way you want me to photograph? Why do you think, I have to, you know, you know, do things the way, so like people say there's a guideline, like aside from like the technical part of photography, people also think, photography has to be one way. And I think, my philosophy background kind of helped me to always explore different thoughts, different thought process, and kind of always raise different questions as regards what could be possible, what is possible, and I'd say centering like Black existence. I mean, it isn't far fetched because I've always lived here all my life, and I'm always out maybe when I have to work. So it's just like the only thing that kind of is possible for me because for the most part, we've kind of been misinterpreted in terms of how people who don't know what Lagos or Africa looks like kind of already have like a misunderstanding of what things should be here. So I think for me was really about understanding how to kind of retell your story from a perspective that is like homegrown perspective, and that kind of has to do with like you making sure you tell your story with more dignity, understanding that this is pretty much like you reimagining already what people think Africa is, and also I really also try to play with like a lot of specificity in terms of when I say I'm photographing in Lagos, Lagos doesn't represent the whole of Africa. Lagos is a state in Nigeria, so there's really like a wide range of experiences that kind of makes Africa a continent. So I think people need to kind of learn and understand that it's really beyond what they think they know. It's really about studying and understanding, and really not put Africa continent in a box, literally. So I think for me, I really like to play with the fact that I'm based in Lagos, and also in Lagos there's so many experiences that are very peculiar to Lagos. And when you go to Ghana, for example, Accra, Kumasi, all of these places have, I mean, under the same nation but different experiences. So I think that's really like the focus point of my work.
You mentioned in one of your interviews, you said that in the past few years, it's always been the West coming to tell our stories for us. And I think that what you do in your work is so incredible because, like you said, although Ghana is so separate from when Nigeria is, there's still a lot of similarities. And as somebody who grew up in Kenya, when I look at your work, there's a sense of home that I feel there. Even if it's just like, having the floor and the ground exposed and seeing the redness of the earth, compared to living in Australia and a lot of it. So the landscape here is very concrete. It just drives me back to what I see home was. And you mentioned a lot of the influences of like, your studies in philosophy, and I see that a lot reflected in your work and the duality of having a balance. And I don't know if you want to speak on it, how that's reflected in your work, the balance of having two, the obsession of having, two things balance each other in terms of like twins, a husband and wife, a brother and sister, where does that fascination develop? Where did that develop from, and how is that, explored in your work?
I mean, if I understand you, are you asking about like the similarities within like, photography and like philosophy, if that's the question?
Yeah,
Um,
how would
um,
do those merge in your practice?
I think, I mean, photography is an art, um, um, and it's also like a very like a thought process. So I think what I really like to play with, like I said earlier, is really understanding like I mean, like the whyness, the what, the is, like the importance of like literally, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I really kind of have to have like a thought process, and that kind of gives me like a guideline. So I think, luckily for me, I mean, like, for the most part, for example, when I was close to finishing uni, like there's this, conversation within myself and my classmates about like, it's really just a waste of time, coming to uni to study philosophy. Because like we were looking at like the labor market as to like what we are going to like do after uni, like what work is available for us. And I kind of, um, then, just always talk to myself in the sense that is beyond like the work. So it's literally like, what can you provide from yourself, from your thought process? So I think like with philosophy and photography, for me, it's always about reading and researching about African African philosophy, and also try to kind of play like visual experience with like those thought process.
Mm. And do you think that's where kind of like the tradition and the modern culture kind of merge together, when you mix both philosophy and art together to create this imagery and capture this energy that exists around you?
I think, like I said, because like we haven't been like properly like represented in storytelling, so
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I'm the first person I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been documentation of someone who is making like those reimagination of like visuals in Lagos or in Nigeria. So I think I would say that like the beautiful thing about now is that like a lot of young people who works at the creative scene are really trying to make sure that everything they do is really literally being documented. And I think that's the benefit of now, or
Mm-hmm.
existing now. And I mean, a lot of people who came before me don't have the luxury, so there's the thought process, but there isn't like the documentation. I think that's like
Mm-hmm.
that's why we're not at the forefront of our storytelling.
Mm. I definitely think that representation needs to continuously happen, and it needs to be driven in a way that doesn't just represent oneness. And I think
Mm,
that that's what you were saying before, when people have this concept of Africa being a country, but not it being a continent, and having different communities represent different existence of Blackness itself. I think that what your involvement with the New Black Vanguard did is that it allowed Blackness to have a global conversation and to connect with other Black artists and other Black existence outside of Africa, outside of Australia, outside of America, to have this conversation of when we are represented, we're represented in a very linear form, you know what I mean? But then when we represent ourselves, we represent such we various existence of who we are as artists, as Black people. And it goes back to your journey and your involvement with the New Black Vanguard. Like, what did that do to your creativity as an artist?
I think it was very interesting when Otman reached out to me to be part of for that amazing I mean, conversation, I'd say. And also to have like side by side like artists who I look up to, and artists who are doing like amazing, like from all over like the continent. I think it was really like humbling to see, and also to kind of have like a synergy all
Mm-hmm.
together. I think that's like the most important thing with our work, like just also show people that, when people say like we don't know who the African or African diaspora creative are. So I think like the book kind of sum up to say this is
Mm-hmm.
this is like what you say you don't know. So I think being part of the book is like, I think one of the things I would cherish for life, you
Mm,
know,
mm,
because it's kind of unusual, because like people really want to kind of always like, so like people, when people want to say diversity, so like when people want to use the word diversity, you often see something like, one black photographer, and then you see
yeah.
like 9 Western photographer, and that is what diversity means to them. And also that's also like a systemic, problem, when you
Mm-hmm.
think, just having one black person or just two black people in the midst of like, hundreds of, Western photographer, for example. I think that's
Mm,
also very problematic. So I think, these kind of sum up like the idea of, having, you know, to kind of like put forward like, the conversation about not having, and then you see like, I mean, like this huge publication now, having to, use the term word of like the first black photographer, the
mm-hmm.
first black photographer. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really, it's such a shame,
Mm-hmm.
when that happens, because ideally, like, we've had the likes of, Samuel Foso, James Bannon, who people regard like, who I think are very much iconic in their rights,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they've really like, inspired like so many of us, including myself. And I wonder why, why is it now that, it's they deem like an African feat to photograph a cover of a magazine, so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really like a very systemic problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, this book really kind of, explore, and and also like, kind of make people understand that the availability of, black people is really at your fingertips.
Mm. And I think what Antoine did, in bringing all these artists together to have this conversation, it allowed a broader conversation to be had about the emergence and the blueprint of what Black contemporary art is. Because I think that Black contemporary art cannot exist in white contemporary art. It exists under that umbrella. And I say this because when Blackness is represented by people who have lived experiences, Black people, the way it's represented is, there's so much dialogue, there's so much that we can pull out of, and there's so much that we can have conversations about. And those things matter in our existence, because there's some things that, maybe the Western world has accepted, but within our cultures and where we come from, it's a hard reality to really digest. You know what I
Mm,
mean? A lot of the conversations that we have with, standing in solidarity with queer communities,
mm,
standing in solidarity with, certain radical things that our parents from their generation
mm,
would think that it's a disrespect and it's going against the cultural
mm,
laws.
mm.
How do you think your work has, reflected in that radicalness of using your work as a social change? How has that been explored? And
I think I really always like to look at the origin. So like when people say, queer, when we use the word like gay, when we use the word, non-binary, or lesbian, or like the LGBTQ,
mm-hmm,
um, because we are so culturally bind and culturally like, very cultural and traditional in our thought process. So I think, I mean, having conversations around like, what has happened before we were colonized would be very
mm-hmm,
interesting, because like only then you understand, you know, I mean, what's already existed, for example, with like my ongoing series about like, the drag community in Lagos, for example, I kind
mm-hmm,
of, I'm looking at, I'm raising conversations around, in the Yoruba culture where I'm from,
mm-hmm,
where like the masquerade all kind of um always play two forms, in the sense that like you can't really tell if the masquerade is a man or a woman. So already
mm-hmm,
like there's already like an origination of like a genderless,
mm-hmm,
form,
mm-hmm,
before like, the West kind of make the distinction and like the definition of this context. So I think,
mm-hmm,
for me, like I think, I think for us to kind of understand what has kind of transpired and happened between our territory, we kind of really need to go look into the roots of it. So I think the surface level conversation can sometimes be problematic because like people need to understand that it wasn't an introduction to Africa. It has already been existing. Like it wasn't introduced, because I think when people want to have this conversation, they kind of look at it from more of, this was introduced, this was introduced, this was introduced. But, before the introduction, there was a genderless, for example, form of masquerade in the Yoruba culture. And how then are we saying this was introduced? So what we need to do is to kind of look at our own history without the infiltration of the Western culture, if you get what I mean. So I think I always kind of employ people to not look at the surface level of the conversation, but look deeper than like the conversation itself.
I was gonna ask, do you have any work that you want to speak about that illustrates, I guess what you're saying in terms of like tapping back to the roots, tapping back to culture and challenging these conversations that in culture we're not able to have because of language barrier, or having it explored through the language of photography?
I mean, I could definitely share some of my work. But ideally, because like the work hasn't been seen anywhere, so I'm just really going to glance through. I mean, for example, so like this is very interesting. I took this photo last year, December, in Lagos, and I felt like it was kind of very much interesting to see like a new meaning to hairstyle. Like a new meaning in the sense that like to kind of have like a rubber in between like the air. So like this process is very, very, very much interesting because like it is very I mean, it could be seen like new, but the hairstyle itself has literally been here. And it's also very interesting to see like the hairstylist kind of like play around like what she finds really around her. So I think when we talk about like the issues of I mean like the societal issue, I think it is very, very difficult for us to think I think it would be very, very difficult for us to think like those things are new. Yeah, there's nothing like the newness of these things. So it might seem like the conversation are being raised more now because I mean, obviously people are tired. Like I think it's very, very disturbing to see that in Nigeria, like people, there's a law that says 14 years imprisonment against LGBTQ community. I think that's very much disturbing, and 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 they are kind of failing to have this conversation because they think is like is like an imported culture, which I think is also very much problematic. Like I've said, so I think there's obviously like a need for us to look back and start having those conversations internally without thinking that somebody brought this onto us or whatnot. I'd also like to show for example this very interesting portrait of Chuka and his dad. So like they live in Lagos and they've brought literally everything. So like these outfits, it's really exists mostly in like the Igbo culture, the Igbo community in Nigeria. And it's very much interesting for me because like they left the community to come to Lagos, but they kind of still are fully represented, if you get what I mean. So there's that sense of identity that comes with the being itself. So like and that shows you how diversified cultures are even like in Nigeria. So like this, so when people see this, they kind of understand that, oh, you be Igbo, like you are from the Igbo community. So literally, so I think I just kind of like to play like around like the idea of 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 appearance, if you get what I mean. also like this outfit is by a Nigerian designer called Kenneth Ize, who explore adire and ashoke, and those two things are also kind of a big part of like the exploration that happens like in the Yoruba creative community, clothing community. And like when people see it, they kind of understand, they could tell that this is where you are from. And it's also very much interesting to see how Kenneth has played into like the newness of of the newness and the nowness to kind of play around like what already has existed. So I think it is very, very like difficult for us to just throw what has happened like 50 years ago, 100 years ago in Africa or in Lagos, in Nigeria away. I think marrying all of them together is what's going to take us further to the next level, I believe. Yeah.
I think it's incredible how your work, has that cross culture of integrating all traditional practices and modernizing it. And I think that's what the contemporariness comes out of, is that recycling of acknowledging what culture is and the pride that we have towards our culture and the pride that we have towards who we are, and identifying that placement, but at the same time, changing that and challenging that and reimagine that newness and how that's going to look like. I really want to talk about I guess I wouldn't say the uprising, but just the Black Renaissance that's happening right now, this liberation of Blackness coming together, standing in solidarity, because globally now we're feeling, these emotions, and we're going through these processing of dismantling the system. How have you been doing in terms of what's happening around the world, communally for you and also globally? How has that impacted you as an artist?
I think it's really such an interesting time for me. I mean, like the first few weeks, I was really bothered about so many things. I was thinking so much about like the new year. Like I was like, why is all of this happening? And I kind of then also put like the thought process of the fact that this is not just about me, this is about the world. So I think I allow like that understanding to kind of take place, to not necessarily feel like this is like I'm the only one this is happening to in the world. So I kind of like take a step back, relax, read more, and then but I think for me has been able to kind of put me grounded in my work, and in what really should be important to me going forward. Because like obviously like what I've learned during this pandemic, as it goes on, is that like literally like life is very simple, and like everything really like us kind of revolves around like family, friends, loved ones, and just like beyond like like the hatred and all of these things that you see happening around the world. So I think for me, I've been able to kind of internalize more from reading books, working out, and kind of staying put with like my old friends, my new friends, my family, my mom. Like I think for me, like I've also kind of tried to actively make sure there's some sort of like activity going on just to keep myself busy.
Yeah. And I think those are great practices right now, because there's a lot to process. I think globally as Black people, there's so much that we're being exposed to, so much that we're consuming, and so much that we're programming and downloading. Because I think that now we're in a stage in our lives, and we're in a stage, I think frequent wise, like when you talk about the energies of this world and the frequencies in this world, it's like we're in a place where Blackness is being recognized, and it's being put in this weird space of it being a trend. Like all of a sudden now Black is a trend, you know what I mean? The artists, Black artists that have been creating work, now they're being put in this space where they're being magnified, you know what I mean? And they're being, I guess, glorified. And I think that there's an act of performative that happens there, where, you know, the art white institutions want to kind of allow Blackness to exist and be like, okay, now you can come in and represent yourself. And it's kind of like, why did we get to where we are right now in order for us to be recognized, in order for us to be valued, in order for our work to be seen as something impactful? Because Black art has always existed. You know what I mean? Black art is basically the skeleton of like what we think pop culture is, what the culture of everything is right now. A lot of it comes from the exploitation of Blackness. And I think that moving forward, like, what's the best advice we can give ourselves as artists, as Black artists, to kind of keep pushing this liberation and keep pushing these representations to happen, you know, in terms of us being in spaces where we don't think that we deserve, you know, having opportunities like yourself shooting for Vogue, shooting for the New York Times, you know, like, what is the best advice you can give to an artist right now?
I think I've learned to always, always ask questions, communicate my feelings, if I'm working on anything that kind of feels like it doesn't kind of represent anything about my space, about my country, about where I live, I kind of always kind of, want to ask questions why really this, this topics is really important to the editors. And, and it's always like a different thing when people ask you to work on something that they see via social media. You are literally living the life. So like, I think I'd always like advise people to always communicate. There's no in communicate how you feel towards a commission work. I think it has to be like an effort to always strive, because like when you are commissioned, sometimes I know it's very difficult to jeopardize your fee or your income or your sustainability. But I think it's always good to always try to have those conversations, because I mean, I've always tried to demand for things like, if I'm making a story in Lagos, I'd love to have like a Lagos writer. I'd love to have an all Lagos involvement, because like then you could see like a synergy in the powerhouse of like me making the story visually, and then someone is really like who lives here is writing the story as well. So I think I mean, like, young creatives should always communicate how they feel, and I think it goes a long way.
And I think sometimes as artists, we have this fear that we are scared to reach out to other artists to kind of, look at our work and reflect on our work, because obviously it's a very tight knitted space. Even though globally we exist, it's still a small space of, Blackness being represented in the art industry. So we kind of switch on that competitiveness of being like, oh, I'm not going to ask another photographer to look at my work because I have to compete. I have to be the first one there in that space because there's no space for two people. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a really great idea to just really start having conversations and critiquing our work, you know what I mean? And coming together in solidarity of creating work together. I just honestly, I have no question in my mind. My mind is going blank. But, I really want to talk about the challenges that you go through as an artist, living in Lagos, Nigeria.
I think I mean, right now, I mean, the big part is that like they're very limited support system. When you think of like the creative space, and most of the people who actively support young people are private organizations, like the Lagos Photo, the ArtX, the Relay Foundation, so like these people are just, they put it upon themselves to, actively kind of, support young people and to give them like space to kind of show their work, to kind of, just, give them some sort of like, validation in quote. So I think, there's a long way to go, because like I personally think, literally everything you see is literally from artship, because like when I shoot, sometimes, like, you have to deal with like, like the people on the road, like the policemen, So I think for me, like there's a need for like a full involvement of the government in my country to kind of support freelance, to support creatives in general. And I mean, the conversation is not being had right now. So I mean, like it's really like a wishful thinking right now. But I think that's really like what should happen, and there has to be more education on like, you know, photography and the creative scene in general. Like it should be really, really big part of the curriculum at the college level, at the university level. So I think I mean those are the things I think are really like a huge challenge for like people like me here. And I think, you know, you know, it makes it more hard and like more very like, you know, uninspiring sometimes to be creating work, you know, when you literally like there's like thousands of challenges at the same time. And you know, so like when you see anybody who work from Lagos or from Nigeria, from Ghana, you know, like these people create from, you know, a lot of hardship, you know, like hardship in the sense that it's like a struggle to do what you do without people supporting you. Yeah.
Definitely. I think that a lot of the times that art is never really valued because people see it sometimes outside of, you know, it being, you know, nice to look like. I think people don't understand the impact that art carries, you know, it being a vehicle for a lot of, you know, a lot of ways to dismantle systems, a lot of way to have conversations about change, to challenge the things that we know that are normal to us, and just kind of, you know, have that awakening of saying that, you know, why don't we put more support into the art industry and see how that goes and see how that forms, you know, humanity and how that benefits humanity. But I think that it's like you said, it's a wishful thinking to really have. I'm curious to understand about your creative process. I think that that's a very common question you get all the time. But
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm working on my personal projects, I take a long time to kind of evaluate and reach out to like, you know, photographers who, I mean, specifically who are from here and who understands, you know, I mean, what it takes to, you know, build a body of work. And I really love to, you know, talk to people who, you know, already exist in this space who before me. So I really always actively, you know, ask questions, you know. I'm sure they're already tired of me now of asking questions, you know, every day. I'm like, you know, I mean, WhatsApping them and saying, oh, I think, you know, what do you think about this? How can you help me? And sometimes they have time, they call me on the phone to speak to me. So I think the process is always, you know, I mean, always it kind of differs. You know, when I'm working on my personal project, I kind of like to take my time to really explore, you know, different conversations. But in terms of like, you know, commission work, you know, I really just I go with the flow of, you know, what they want me to do, what I think is best to do, and they kind of merge it together, and I get work done. You know, interestingly, I'm shooting some artists later today in Lagos, and I literally I've had to kind of, you know, plan like the mood board with the theme of the magazine over the email. So like I think it's always like a synergy and like, you know, understanding sometimes things change. So if you want me to shoot in a certain mood and then the weather is not fair to me, then we have to kind of explore something else.
I don't know if you have any more work that you want to talk about and really highlight. If you have any work to share, because I have a question of like, does your work highlight the importance of unity, connecting to home, connecting to self, and if it's so, how do you explore it?
I think like for example, this wasn't photographed in Lagos or in Nigeria. So it was a trip I took to Niger Republic in 2018, and it was also like an Islamized community, if you get what I mean. So I also felt the need to make portrait of people from the back, you know, and this is also from like a dignified perspective that I kind of find it interesting, because like I might think, you know, they really look interesting, and you know, fascinating. And I think people sometimes shy away from, strangers taking their photographs. And I mean, like literally what I was really doing there was to kind of capture people emotion from the back. And kind of it says a lot about, seeing people the way you want to see yourself, seeing like, like people in your picture are literally like you need to see them as yourself. So I think for me, I always try to play with that idea of understanding that it is beyond me as an artist. It is really about people who are, in my front. Yeah. I mean, like, because also like I'm keen because like I felt like, like the conversation should be less visual and less conversation and more conversation. So I kind of, just, very I selected very tiny amounts of work to talk about. But feel free to ask me if you have any more questions, for sure.
I love the photo of it's like a group of people in all black. I really love that photo. I think that it's such a very iconic photo because it just reminds me of just the group and the sense of community that we have, and just like the joy and the like,
I mean, this was very interesting because, like, it wasn't like a planned thing. And these boys are a group of skaters from Lagos, Nigeria, and who run their own fashion brand called Motherland. And I mean, when I think about this image and I think about where they are now, what they've done for themselves, I think it's really like, interesting to see that, sometimes like we kind of have to always capture people in progress. Do you understand what I mean? So I think that's why for me this image is very, very key to me, because like I think, looking at this photo from 2018 and what they've what they've done, like being on the cover of ID magazine, like, so like it says a lot about, just understanding and, identifying like, people who have like, potential. And like this shoot was commissioned by Skepta, who also is a British Nigerian rapper, in collaboration with Nike. So yeah, I think for me it's really one of my favorite photographs ever.
I think what's so incredible about photography and what kind of pulled me to become a photographer is that ability to capture time. And like you're saying, capturing the progress and the evolvement and the metamorphosis of individuals, you know what I mean? I think it's an incredible ability to have. We're gonna invite Alias back. I'm not sure if he has any questions from the viewers, but I think that he's going to be hello.
Hi. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, but Stephen, I wanted to ask about a particular project. I know that you've been working with identical twins and taking portraits, and the series is absolutely stunning as a piece of work, but to me it's really beautiful in that it takes a sort of global phenomenon, twins exist everywhere, but makes it very specific to a community and a place due to I think some of the local mythology. Could you talk a bit about that project, why it's important for you to make a personal project about twins?
The project is quite like, one of my favorite exploration, I would say, because I find it very interesting for people, for example, who look alike, who I see them as like, like one two in one, or yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how to, because like when you see identical twins, you see pretty much the same person in two people. And then you question stuff like, why do you choose to wear the same shoes, the same outfits? So like I kind of wanted to explore the psychology behind that, and I felt like, most of these people are are not given the opportunity to be themselves. I think I would say that, because there's this assumption that when two people look alike, they should wear the same thing, they should do the same thing. And so, like, having conversations with people who I work with here in Lagos, interestingly, said like the idea of them looking alike, it's definitely was from like the creation. So like you can't argue that, you can't question that. But the question I was raising to them was, are you aware of you wearing the same outfit, for example? And they were like, that's how they've been catered for growing up. So like, people who gift them stuff buy the same red shoes, buy the same red hair. And I felt like it's interesting to kind of explore beyond the mythology around the twins itself, because like I don't know if you've read the origin of twins. For example, in Nigeria, that Mary Slessor kind of stopped the killing of twins in Nigeria because people find them to be a taboo back in the days. And then until she stopped the killing of twins, and then people started seeing them as a small god, to kind of always kind of worship and like kind of put them in like a place of deity. And I kind of wanted to kind of move forward from that already like foundational understanding of twins into like the psychological parts. And I feel like it's still very much ongoing, because like I'm developing more texture context into the story. But I think for me, like playing around like alongside like the psychological part was kind of very fascinating to me.
It's a great project. I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to bring it to a close. But thank you both for the conversations. If anyone hasn't seen the new Black Vanguard exhibition, I would strongly urge people to do so. And while we're in lockdown, the virtual tour that you can take, that you can access either through the photo website or Bundle Place website, is actually a really great way of experiencing the show and seeing both Stephen's work and the work of other brilliant photographers. If you'd like to find out more about the new Black Vanguard exhibition, upcoming Photo Live talks, or more information about the Photo 2021 International Festival of Photography, which will take place from the 18th of February to the 7th of March, please visit photo.org.au. There's also an essay by Antoine Sargent with more information about the artists featured in the new Black Vanguard that is also on the website. Please join us again on Monday at 10 a.m. for Photo Live with another photographer from the new Black Vanguard, Quill Lemons from America, from the USA. And that just leaves me to say thank you both to Ruth and Stephen for the very...
for having me. Thank you so much, Ruth. I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future.
Please come. You're more than welcome.
Yeah. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, Claire.
Stephen, have a wonderful day in Lagos, and have a good evening, Ruth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. Peace and love.